listening to America First Radio. Here is your host, Paul Adams.
Hey there, everyone. Glad to have you back. If you're here for the first time, this is Paul Adams, and you're at America First Radio, where we can have a no-holds-barred civil conversation in the untamed political jungle. Today I'll be discussing in-depth Islam and also reviewing some of the current events. Lots of territory to cover. Betsy DeVos, Jeff Sessions, and Rex Tillerson have been confirmed. Today we should be seeing the swearing in of Jeff Sessions. And we have a judge who is throwing a monkey wrench in the immigration executive order who needs to be recalled. See, it's in situations like these, and again, I make my case for a fourth branch of government, which would consist of the people, the owners, the employers of their government. After all, the Constitution was written at the behest of the people. It's becoming more and more apparent that we need to use our online technologies because we just can't rely on rogue representatives or judges to do our bidding. And then we'd be able to recall them by an online vote. And you know, Switzerland is leading the way in this arena. They are using technologies in their government to include direct democracy, to let the people, the owners of the government, call the shots. What form of government do we have in the United States? Well, we have a form of government where stupid representatives, disconnected representatives, rule over the employers, the people. And here's a prime example of the kind of representation we allow in our hallowed hallways of power. This is House Representative Hank Johnson. I want you to listen to this, and you need to understand that this man actually campaigned and people actually voted for this guy as a House rep, and he's been in the House since 2007, and here he is talking in a congressional hearing, talking to an admiral. Okay? Listen to this.
No, this is a island that at its widest level is 12 miles from shore to shore, and at its smallest level or smallest location, it's 7 miles between one shore and the other. Is that correct?
I don't have the exact dimensions, but to your point, sir, I think Guam is a small island.
Very small island, and about 24 miles, if I recall, long. So 24 miles long, about 7 miles wide at the least widest place on the island, and about 12 miles wide on the widest part of the island. And I don't know how many square miles that is. Do you happen to know?
I don't have that figure with me, sir. I can certainly supply it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, my fear is that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
We don't anticipate that.
So this is the kind of conversation that retards human civilization and intelligence, and yet this representative has been voted back into office 10 years. And what's even more disturbing here is that the admiral has actually given him the time of day. In essence, he has validated him, enabled him, where he should have stood up and walked out of the room for having insulted his intelligence. And this is emblematic of the cancer that is in D.C. right now. Another good example would be Nancy Pelosi, who referred to President Trump as President Bush just the other day, and who also said that we must vote to bring the Syrian refugees in before we can tell if they are terrorists or not. Go figure that one out. So there are so many swamp creatures. They come in various shapes and sizes, like this wonky, honky-tonky jackass Maxine Waters, who claims that Putin has advanced into Korea. Then there's Pocahontas Warren, who was ordered to shut up and sit down during the Jeff Sessions confirmation hearings. And then there's the Blob. Yes, I call her the Blob. I don't want to dignify her name. She just came out of hibernation the other day. She was featured in a video encouraging women to break the glass ceiling, which only proves to me one thing. Her campaign was all about the woman card. You know who I'm talking about, right? Little does she realize that there are many, many women out there breaking the glass ceiling every day. And it's not just Democrats. We have people like Paul Ryan, McConnell, Rubio, Mitt Romney, who are trying to slow Trump's momentum. And then there's even the SCOTUS nominee, I won't even mention his name, he doesn't deserve to be mentioned, who is wanting that the president who nominated him has made disheartening remarks about a judge who is imperiling our national security. As the employer, as one of the employers, as the people, I would immediately recall this guy. He needs to be recalled. And again, another example where we need to introduce direct democracy in increments is in the Supreme Court. Okay, we cannot allow politicized judges to determine the outcome of our future. So if we're going to have a government that is of, by, and for the people, we need to have some form of direct democracy here. Enough is enough. The representatives don't really care. They're incompetent. They're inefficient. They are wasteful. And they lie. They lie through their teeth. So if you want to read more about what I propose, just go to myamerica.win and you can download the little brochure. It's free. Again, we need to have some kind of a revival here. We need to reinvent democracy. Otherwise, we're just going to keep repeating the same old mistakes. What do you think is going to happen after Trump leaves, after the second term? We're going to go back to our old ways. The globalists are going to infiltrate the government just like they had for the last 50 years. It's going to be a huge mess. So we need to fix it in increments, slowly, slowly. This is why I never went into politics. I never liked politics until 2015 when Trump came in the scene. And, well, it's a long story. I was actually called to be a campaign advisor for another, I will not mention his name, candidate, a write-in candidate, because I wanted to see some change in the Republic. I wanted to see some tectonic shifts in the way we do business. And to make a long story short, anyway, I finally went all in with Trump. He wants to drain the swamp. He's an agent of change. He's a populist. He's the people's proxy, their agent. You know, if someone had told me 3 years ago that I would be someday over my head in a U.S. election, I would have told him to check into rehab. You know, I have some very good friends who are therapists. One of them has been nominated, well, actually she has been awarded 3 years in a row as Best Mental Health Therapist in Culver City. Top of the line. She'll take care of people like that. Anyway, we need to drain the swamp, but we also need to make sure the swamp doesn't refill after Trump leaves White House, if the Lord doesn't return before then. You know, someone said, President Trump is everything Republicans have claimed to be but never were. I agree. I would argue that we need patriots, we need people who are not in government. In fact, you know, there should be some kind of an exclusion clause where if you have been in government for 3 or 4 years, you are not allowed to campaign for president. You need to be an outsider. We need to redefine our vocabulary. Anybody who is perpetrating the myth that we have a two-party system that has our best interests at heart is perpetuating a lie. It's a myth. It's an illusion. Let's talk about the real polemic, which is between the globalist elites and the populists. And today I'm going to go all out, no holds barred, on Islam, okay? I already said previously that I respect secular Muslims. My definition of a secular Muslim is Muslims who allow the coexistence of other religions. For example, Muslims in Egypt and Lebanon are two good examples where Christianity and Judaism coexist with Islam. During the election, I was on Twitter, and I belonged to 15 groups where we retweeted each other's tweets and memes. These were all pro-America, pro-Trump tweets. Each group had 30 to 50 people, and we were tweeting sometimes 12, 18 hours a day. So just imagine the millions and millions of impressions we were making, okay? Just myself on a monthly basis, and I only had at the time, 6,000 to 7,000 followers. By retweeting my memes in these retweet rooms, I was getting 6 million impressions per month, which is not bad. Can you imagine what others were getting? People that had 100,000 followers, 200,000 followers, in the millions, and they belong to not just 15 groups, they belong to 20, 30 groups. And we were making waves. Now, in one of those groups, this Muslim, whose handle was Muslim for Trump, came on board, and to me, immediately, it smelled bad. It looked suspicious. So I messaged him within the group, and I said, good to have you on board, buddy. Maybe you can start a blog, because I think a lot of people would like to know how you're opposed to Sharia law and ISIS, and also how taqiyya is used on infidels to fool them into believing Islam is a religion of peace. Well, guess what? The next day, his account was deleted. Never heard from him again. Gone. And that got me thinking. You see, a Muslim will never ever denounce Sharia law in public, because at the end of the day, he has an obligation to lie to the infidel. It's called taqiyya. But that obligation does not apply to denouncing Sharia law. A radical Muslim cannot put it in writing that he doesn't believe in Sharia law and expect to remain alive. It won't happen. So this then should be, for me, the test. Muslims coming into the United States, after passing, of course, the mandatory background checks, must do two things. Not only must they pledge allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, but also sign a declaration that Sharia law is incompatible with the United States Constitution, and they must also denounce taqiyya. And let's see how many of them will sign that public declaration, which would be broadcasted publicly to all the mosques for people to know. I think not many would sign it, because it would be like signing their own death warrant. And if they can't sign it, they obviously don't belong in America. Simple as that. So next time someone says they are not radicals, just tell them to put up a blog that explains taqiyya and have them denounce Sharia law. And watch what happens. They won't do it. Now, I found this article at TPMDC, okay, and I'm not the only one who thinks along those lines. Representative Steve King, a Republican from Iowa, who previously made it very clear that he doesn't believe immigrants from the Middle East want to assimilate into American culture. He wants Muslims to come to the United States and reject Sharia law. He made these comments when he was asked whether he supported Trump's proposed ban on Muslims entering the United States. King said he wasn't confident any immigrants from the Middle East would do so, that is, reject Sharia law, because he says there's already members in Congress who will not renounce Sharia law, speaking of Keith Ellison and Andre Carson. Sharia law, he says, is incompatible with the United States Constitution, and so if they want to demonstrate that they're open to being Americanized, the first thing they should do is renounce Sharia law, which is exactly what I was thinking. And what was interesting was some of the comments that were made after that article was posted on that site, on TPM. One person said, Christian dogma is incompatible with the United States Constitution, and so if they want to demonstrate that they are open to being Americanized, the first thing they should do is renounce Christian dogma. Unless and until that happens, I do not consider them Americanized. Of course, I'm not sure what, if any, Christian laws run counter to the United States Constitution. I would be the first one to demand Christians to renounce Christianity if they were doing something wrong, like stoning women or hurling gays from rooftops. Absent this evidence, I cannot in all good faith require Christians to renounce their doctrine, especially not when they seem to be on the chopping block of many of the Muslim countries. How many Christians have been killed, decapitated? There's another comment here. He says, well, Steve, Talmudic law, biblical law, Catholic law, Orthodox law are also inconsistent with the laws of the United States, aren't they? In fact, any set of religious laws would be inconsistent. Shall we have everyone who professes to be religious to proclaim the supremacy of U.S. law, which is an amalgam of constitutional principles and interpretations, statutory law, and English common law, and renounce the religious laws? Well, my answer to that is there's much in Talmudic law and biblical law that at one time ran counter to the Constitution. There has been much reformation along the way, which Islam will not entertain. They will not reform. Primarily when it comes to the killing of gays, stoning of women, and women's slave trade, not to mention marrying prepubescent girls, polygamy, genital mutilation, and taqiyya. You would be hard-pressed to compare Islam to modern-day Christianity or Judaism. So I don't think I'm the only one arguing for a signed declaration by Muslims to renounce Sharia law. I'm not the only one who has his share of detractors. The leader for the Party for Freedom in the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, has proposed that people who reside in the Netherlands but hold passports from Islamic countries be required to sign a declaration renouncing Sharia. See, it makes perfect common sense. Now, putting all the drama and the histrionics aside, this is all about common sense, folks. Okay? It's not about Islamophobia. It's not about racism. It's not about any of that. It's about securing our nation from Sharia law. Period. End of story. If we discovered, I'm just using a theoretical example here, if theoretically we discovered a three-toed, freckled, orange-haired tribe of cannibalistic pygmies somewhere in Iceland, buried under the ice, and they wanted entry into the United States, and not only did they want entry, but the right to practice their cannibalism, I think we would be hard-pressed to formulate some kind of argument which required that the tribe renounced its cannibalism before entering the United States, at the very least, all other vetting notwithstanding. Now, I think I made my case here. Now, moving on to other news, Benjamin Fulford, the former bureau chief for Forbes in Tokyo, from his February 7th online installment said, quote, multiple sources confirmed that about 70 arrest warrants will be served on power brokers and politicians in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and New York this week, shortly after Jeff Sessions is confirmed as U.S. Attorney General. Among those to be arrested are Democratic Senators Chuck Schumer, Richard Blumenthal, and Hillary Clinton's vice presidential pick Tim Kaine, Pentagon sources say. These arrests will follow 474 arrests that took place in California last week, as a pedophile ring that served Hollywood and West Coast elites was taken down. It is interesting to note the California arrests were only reported by local news outlets and completely ignored by the big corporate networks. Well, par for the course. He goes on to say former U.S. President Bill Clinton is also reported to be singing like a canary and has provided evidence that will lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton and many others, Pentagon sources say. There are credible tabloid news reports that Hillary was caught trying to flee to Bahrain and was stopped. End of quote. We'll see what happens. Benjamin may be onto something. But thank God that we are cleaning the swamp, the pedophilic rings. That should be number one, our priority. We must thank President Trump for that. Thank you also for that wonderful speech at the National Prayer Breakfast. Thank you for wanting to tear down the Johnson Amendment that will free up public discourse. We have to keep praying for President Trump. These are very turbulent times we're living in. And we must also start praying for Rex Tillerson, John Kelly, and Jeff Sessions, who will be at the tip of the spear in restoring law and order. Because don't think for a minute that the communists, the atheistic left, the Luciferians, will just walk away quietly into the night. They have been leaving no stone unturned to sidetrack Trump. And I found on Twitter a document, a strategy outlined by David Brock of what they're planning to do. It's been circulating on Twitter. They are not going away, folks. Okay, the commies are planning to redouble their efforts. This is why President Trump must come out with both guns a-blazing. These people are fighting a war of attrition. We need to end their playbook. So now that we'll have God in the political arena, as the Johnson Amendment will be torn to shreds, and as the religious right will have its voice heard. As I'm writing this, I'm listening to Christopher Hitchens arguing that coexistence with God would be compared to living in North Korea, where everything is regulated and controlled. To which I say there has never been a stronger case for God than to watch the irreparable damage Satanists and Luciferians have inflicted on the world. Pizzagate is a very good example. See, nobody mentions Lucifer. Nobody wants to define him, prove his existence, because it just follows that if you can prove Lucifer, you can prove God exists. And now, in other news at the ground level here, there's a story that Soros suggests that one way of taking out Trump is a military coup. If Soros can't steal the election, his only recourse is a military coup. Then we have stories, Iran fires yet another missile, the third in as many days, tempting their fate. Russia prepares for war with NATO by preparing its airspace units. The MSM globalists attack Trump on a magazine cover. The Economist shows Trump throwing a firebomb. This is The Economist, folks, okay? The globalist oracle. Twitter is going to clamp down on trolls. They will be deleting accounts. The left starts fight clubs to bash the right, to start street fights. U.S. troops and arms buildup continues along the Russian border. British Prime Minister supports Iran nuclear deal. There's Soros fingerprints on lawsuits against Trump. They're going to try and tie him up in the courts. California senator says half his family is illegal. In an interview with O'Reilly, Trump asked the question no one has dared to ask, which is, do you think our country is so innocent? You know, apart from Jimmy Carter, what president has not killed innocents in wars, in interventions, in government overthrows? In other headlines, 30% of DC insiders are part of pedophile ring. The states warned that reinstating the travel ban will unleash chaos. Secretary of Defense James Mattis tells North Korea he won't tolerate their games. And there is one case of female genital mutilation per hour reported in the UK. Amid UN warnings, Israel is ready to pass historic resettlement bill. The Israeli Air Force has pummeled Hamas. The Chinese Communist Party says war with the United States would be a disaster. And the Yemen Houthis strike Saudi capital. And you can view all these headlines by going to trump-x-press.com. Now, as I've said before, going up now to 500,000 feet, as I've said before, Donald John Trump has been prepared to be the President of the United States so America can be cleaned up before the second coming. And I know what you're thinking, here he is, here's another Christian fanatic, zealot. But you know what this is all about, folks, right? What do you do to your house when you expect a very important person to visit you in a week? You get rid of all the garbage, you make sure your yard is clean, presentable, and this is exactly what is happening now in America. Before the Lord's second coming, I'm going to say it again. Trump is appointed to clean up America before the second coming of Jesus Christ. Before that happens, there will be a major war. The Muslims are egging us on, the Iranians especially, and who knows who else wants a war. You know, the Luciferians certainly want a war. Oh yeah, they want to bring in chaos so that after the chaos they can roll out their Luciferian one world order. The Muslims want a war. They call it the end-time war. So tensions are building up. Russia will have to decide whether to side with Iran and China or the United States. It's a huge decision. The United States could be baited into war by Iran, knowing that China will back it up. China knows it lost its chance to be the preeminent world juggernaut when Hillary lost the election. And they may throw caution to the wind and start a war with Israel to bait the United States, or expand their territorial reach in the Southeast Pacific. Because Hillary, folks, according to sources, had she won, the Chinese were going to start a war with her, or she was going to start a war with them, and have China win the war. Do you see what I'm saying? That was a setup. Now we hear Turkey's Erdogan say that the aim is a clash of civilizations, because there's no possibility for a coexistence between Islam and Christianity. He says Islam cannot have interfaith relationships, no dialogue. So let's connect the dots. The Vatican and Erdogan get along famously, but Christians and Muslims cannot have an interfaith relationship. Do you smell something rotten here? I mean, what's the Vatican's role in all this? How many tentacles do they have? It reminds me of Albert Pike's letter, a Confederate soldier during the Civil War who wrote a letter. He was the Grand Master of a Luciferian group known as the Order of the Palladium, or Sovereign Council of Wisdom, which was founded in Paris in 1737. He also wrote the book Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Masonry. And purportedly he could foresee the future. He wrote a letter which describes the conditions leading up to the 3 world wars. And I will read what he said about World War III. Now, some will say the words like Zionist did not exist back in his day. Maybe not, but, prescient Lucifer sure knew the word and could communicate it to Albert Pike. Here's what he wrote. Quote, the Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the State of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of a complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm which, in all of its horror, will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then, everywhere, the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilizations, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. And this manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. It sounds to me like we are in for a ride. One thing is almost certain. A bellicose Iran is asking for it. When it continues to test long-range missiles, short-range missiles, in contravention of UN resolutions, it is pushing our buttons, folks. It is pushing our buttons. When Mike Pence was interviewed by George Stephanopoulos, he told him in no uncertain terms, Iran better rethink its course. All options are on the table. We have a new sheriff in town. He's not going to play around with Iran. And the Rothschilds, of course, are not going to step away quietly into the night. Soros, the Clintons, no matter how obvious you make it to them that they have run out of moves, simply won't take no for an answer, and so the only move left for them is to throw the chessboard out the window. They would rather see a global financial collapse or a world war than turn their agenda around and help humanity ascend. Because why? Because their allegiance lies with Lucifer, and Lucifer's agenda is the dehumanization of the human family in order to rob us of our free will so that we can be controlled, so that we can be socially engineered. See, they know no other god but Lucifer. To them, it's all about control, control. So, our president is going to stop human trafficking, the drug cartels, the pedophilic crimes, and Lucifer is not very happy about that. The demon-possessed left, the commies who don't want to have anything to do with what is decent, traditional, religious, modest, who are hell-bent on taking America down, hate Trump. I watched them at the National Sheriff's Association meeting where they met with him at the White House. The sheriff said they were never invited before in the White House. They were never heard by any president. No one was interested in their point of view until now. So, if you want to push our buttons, if you want to take it to the limit, God is saying, fine, bring it on. If you think you're going to push Christianity around with your Islamic proxies, if you think you're going to mess with America and Israel with impunity, I've good news for you. I set up Trump to do some house cleaning. Get used to it. After he's done, I'm sending my son who died on the cross to clean up, only this time his appearance will melt mountains. Buckle up, get ready, the day's approaching. The globalists want to bring it on. The Luciferians want to bring it on. The Islamists want to bring it on. China wants to bring it on. You know, there was an article that caught my eye on World Net Daily the other day. It's a bit esoteric, but it has everything to do with the times we're living in. A rabbi in Baja, Mexico, Rabbi Hershkovich, was shocked to see a red heifer, which at some point must be used for the purification of the third temple. The red heifer is one of the most mystifying Torah commandments. It is a necessary element for purifying Jews to enable them to do the service in the temple. And over the course of approximately 1,000 years, during the first and second temple, only 9 red heifers were used in preparing the waters to purify Jews. So according to Jewish tradition, the 10th heifer will be used by the Messiah. Now, whether it's that heifer that is in Baja or not, we know that the Temple Institute in Jerusalem last year imported embryos of red Angus, a distinctively red breed of cow, and implanted them in Israel cows at a farm in the Negev. So the red heifer must be examined for its purity, cannot have any blemishes, not even a strand of white or black hair. But it struck a chord with me. I think we are living in biblical times, end times. And everybody has a role to play here, unbeknownst to them. Time is compressing. It's compressing for Iran, for Israel, for the United States, for the pedophiles. Populism is emerging as the new wave of governance for the future. We can no longer have elites behind closed curtains calling the shots. Do you know that Iran has an 8-foot story mural of the captured U.S. sailors on their knees? So if this is what a victory looks like to them, they are in for a very rude awakening. And I'm in full agreement with President Trump that disproportionate, overwhelming force of shock and awe must be used on our enemies. We don't have the manpower or the war chest for a protracted war. We can't have another World War II or Vietnam or Iraq. The days of drawn-out, protracted, conventional wars where casualties mount and battles rage for weeks to gain hilltops, those days are over. The time to be nice is over. They get 1 warning, 2 warnings, 3 warnings, 4 warnings, and then it's time to rumble. The battle lines between light and darkness are being drawn. We are entering a time that was foreseen in the Garden of Eden when God told the serpent that he could bruise the heel of the woman's posterity, but in return it would have its head crushed. This is the time we're in right now. This is the time when the serpent knows it's going to have its head crushed. And the spirit of freedom, of liberty, of purifying our nation is infusing all patriots, not just in the United States, but across the world. The time for appeasement is over. Get out of the way, we're coming through. Soros has crossed too many red lines. He reminds me of what Hitler had said. He said, we may go down, but we will take the world with us. So I'm going to stop here. I wanted to go in depth into the topic of immigration, but I will stop here. Maybe next time I'll talk about it. For now, folks, pray for President Trump, for Rex Tillerson, John Kelly, for Jeff Sessions. God bless America. God bless President Trump.